Hi, everybody. Continuing on with the revisions that the Georgia Association of Realtors, or GAR, has made to their contract forms for 2025. These revisions will be available to agents in Georgia June 1st, 2025. And I'm recording this mid-May 2025. Today, I am covering the revisions that the Georgia Association of Realtors made to F322, the Community Association Disclosure Exhibit. GAR has not addressed this form in quite a while, so let me share my screen and dive in. There are quite a few changes, but nothing too major. So hang on, let me share my screen and we'll go over it together. Again, this is GAR Form F322, Community Association Disclosure Exhibit. And these are the revisions coming out June 1st. I have my notes here, but you can always tell at the bottom, a revised form will have the date 6/1/25. If it has not been revised, it will say 1/1/25. So the two biggest changes actually have to do with the directions to the seller for completing this disclosure and to the buyer for how to use this disclosure. So one of the biggest things, and the changes are I have underlined in red. Basically, the seller should fill it out accurately and completely. It does say, if new information is learned by the seller, which materially changes the answers you're in, seller must immediately update and provide buyer with revised copy of disclosure up until closing. However, notwithstanding the seller's duty to update this disclosure, seller's payment obligations pursuant to this disclosure shall be based on the seller's initial disclosure, excluding payment obligations related to special assessments. What does that mean? Listing agents, when you are giving this form for your sellers to complete, they need to find out the fees that they have to disclose on this form. If not, this hasn't changed, they are obligated at closing to pay any fees they did not disclose or any overage from what the actual fee is versus what they did disclose, even if those changes. So what this new edition is saying, the seller's financial obligations at closing regarding what they put on this form is based on what they initially put on this form. They still have a duty to update it, but that does not change their financial obligations if they put a price too low or did not disclose a fee. The only exception to that is related to a special assessment. Then under the buyer's use of this disclosure, what got changed is GAR referenced their own community consumer brochures. The buyer is advised to review what to consider when buying a property in a community association, Consumer Brochure 16, and or what to consider when buying a property in a condominium. We know that refers to ownership, not style, CB 19. Just for comparison's sake, this is what these two instructional forms looked like in January and will be changing. And some of that verbiage has been changed a little bit. For example, the seller was charged with making sure the fees are accurate, so forth and so on. And the buyer, it stated that the covenants can normally be amended. All of that information is already addressed in these consumer brochures. Instructor to viewer. You guys, GAR has a lot of consumer brochures. You should really consider putting in the hands of your customers and clients all appropriate consumer brochures. So check those out and use those. Moving on with the changes that GAR has made to the Community Association disclosure. Under the type of association, under the mandatory membership, they added non-condominium because sometimes there's a mandatory association, even for a fee simple neighborhood. And additionally, they put in parentheses mandatory membership community association property owners. So they just made those two distinctions. And under the age restricted community, these two check boxes have been there if all units are occupied by a person 62 or older, or at least 80%. In the January version, those two check boxes were in line with these other ones, and they really should be, they're sub check boxes under the age restricted community. So they corrected that. Under the annual assessments, it is just a new format with more specific information. So in January, this is what it looked like for annual assessments. It had a dollar amount and then sub check boxes how it was to be paid, monthly, quarterly, so forth and so on. In the June 1st revision, it talks about per year, and if it is a fiscal year, the throughout this disclosure exhibit, the CAD exhibit, they have now referenced a fiscal year. So if it is a fiscal year rather than a calendar year, it does have a fill in the blank to indicate when the beginning of the fiscal year is. So again, it's just a new format, providing for some more specific information, and it gets continued on down here. Under the special assessments, under the transfer initiation, I'm sorry, not special assessments, but transfer initiation and admin fees, it does state the addition for June is seller will pay any transfer, initiation, and administrative fee above this amount. So the seller is required to disclose to the buyer the dollar amount for those fees. And if the actual fees are higher, the seller is required to pay those at closing. Again, this is not new information. It's just been reworded for clarity to the buyers and the sellers. Under other association expenses, GAR just added that this fee here for other does not include the association fees or any transfer limitations. So they just added the association dues. They added that. The other change they made, this is just a note, not a change, but under violations, there is an additional checkbox that got moved to the top of page 3. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Now, in this, under B, the further explanatory paragraphs, under the type of association, this subparagraph 1A is new, and it states, some large or complex communities have one or more layers of associations, master associations, and sub-associations responsible for the administration of different portions of a community. While owners normally pay assessments to one association, that association may be responsible for making assessment payments to other associations. In other cases, an owner may be responsible for paying assessments directly to multiple associations. So sellers need to find that out. This is more information for a buyer. So that paragraph is new. In June, GAR is removing paragraph B1C, owner's limitations. And what that subparagraph addressed was needed repairs to common areas. And I just have it here. This in my red box, that is from the January version, just so you can see for comparison's sake what got removed. So that is the owner limitation subparagraph that did get removed. Under contact information, GAR simplified the verbiage, and they just put that the buyer is authorized as the closing attorney to provide the association with any contact information for the buyer in its possession, meaning in the closing attorney's possession. And as I already mentioned, under the annual assessments, when they're talking about fees, they added fiscal because some HOAs and management companies operate on a fiscal year rather than a calendar year. So it does state association's fiscal year, which may or may not be based on calendar year, for the fiscal year in which the agreement closes. And they have also added under the account statement or clearance letter, closing letter fees are not transfer, initiation, and admin fees, and shall be paid for by the seller, regardless of the amount disclosed in the by the seller in Section A5 above. So a closing letter is a seller fee at closing. Under the special assessments, you'll see here this verbiage, these subparagraphs B and C. This is the same verbiage that it was in January. It is going to be changed. It was supposed to have been changed, but in the training version I got, they missed that accidentally. So that will be addressed hopefully before June, if not definitely January. But the title of these two subparagraphs are going to be changed for payment of undisclosed special assessments. More simplified verbiage under the transfer, initiation, and admin fees. It does say seller shall pay any transfer, initiation, and administrative fee in excess of the amount disclosed herein. So how many times now has this form disclosed to a seller any fees in actuality at closing that are higher than what you have disclosed on this form? That is going to be your financial obligation to pay at closing, even if it benefits the buyer. So at least 3 times, and GAR has simplified this language to impress upon the seller. You really need to find out from the HOA and management company what those fees are so that they are disclosed accurately. And that is it. So not a lot of changes. Again, the biggest thing is probably adding in the fiscal year and just more and more verbiage to a seller regarding their potential financial obligation at closing for undisclosed fees or fees that are in excess of what they had disclosed, and a few different the reference to the consumer brochures in the instructions to the buyer. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of the videos on the revisions of the forms. The GAR Forms Committee is bringing to us June 1st, 2025. Thank you so much for watching. Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta, satisfying your needs with service, innovation, and education. Bye. If you like that video, check out the one here. If you like the content on this entire channel, please click here to subscribe. I try to take even the most complicated of real estate situations and make them crystal clear. See what I did there? Real estate made crystal clear. Thank you guys so much for watching.